The morning had started like any other kind of hell. Clara woke on the floor of her father's root cellar, her back against frozen earth, her coat pulled tight around her swollen belly. January wind screamed through the cracks in the door above. She'd been sleeping down here for 3 weeks now, ever since her condition became impossible to hide, ever since her father had looked at her across the dinner table and said, "You've shamed this family enough. I won't have you under my roof." She was 19 years old and had nowhere else to go. The town of Bitterroot sat at the edge of Montana territory, a collection of wooden buildings clinging to existence where the plains met the mountains. It was 1883, and the railroad was coming, bringing money, bringing people, bringing a future that felt as distant to Clara as the moon. Her future had collapsed the moment Thomas Ferris, the merchant's son, had promised her marriage and then vanished east when she'd told him about the baby. Her father, William Whitmore, had been the town's schoolmaster for 15 years. Respected, church-going, rigid as winter iron. The scandal had broken something in him, or maybe it had just revealed what was already there. Clara heard his boots on the cellar stairs now. "Get up," he said. His voice was flat. "We're going to town." She struggled to her feet, her body heavy and awkward. "Why?" "You'll see." He didn't look at her as he climbed back up. Clara followed, her heart starting to pound. In the 3 weeks since he'd cast her out of the house proper, he'd barely spoken to her. He'd left food at the cellar door, not enough, never enough, and ignored her completely otherwise. This sudden attention felt dangerous. The wagon waited outside, old Jonas already hitched and stamping in the cold. Her father stood by it, still not meeting her eyes. "Get in." "Father, please, what's happening?" "Get in." She climbed onto the hard bench, her hands shaking. He took the reins without a word and started down the frozen road toward town. The landscape around them was brutal in its beauty. Endless white snow, skeletal trees, mountains rising like teeth against a gray sky. Clara had lived here her whole life and had never felt so far from home. They passed the Peterson farm. Martha Peterson was hanging laundry, and she stopped to stare as they went by. Clara saw recognition in the woman's face, then something like pity. Or was it contempt? She couldn't tell anymore. Everyone looked at her differently now. "Father?" Clara tried again, her voice small. "Where are we going?" "Town Square." "Why?" He was quiet for a long moment, then, "Because I can't feed 2 mouths I'm not responsible for." The words hit her like a fist. "What does that mean?" "It means you made your choice. Now I'm making mine." The town square came into view. Clara's stomach dropped. There were people gathered, maybe 30 or 40 of them, standing in loose clusters around the central platform that usually held produce vendors on market days. Now it stood empty except for a single post driven into the wood. An auction block. "No." The word came out as a whisper. "Father, no. You'll do as you're told." His voice was still flat, but there was something underneath it now, something like satisfaction. "I've already made the arrangements, posted the notice 3 days ago. You can't, this isn't legal." "It's perfectly legal. You're an unmarried woman without means, living in my household. I have the right to recover my losses however I see fit." He pulled the wagon to a stop at the edge of the square. "The law's on my side, girl. It always has been." Clara's mind raced. She'd heard of this happening, young women sold into domestic service to pay off family debts, orphans auctioned to the highest bidder for labor contracts. But she'd never imagined her own father. "Please," she grabbed his arm, "don't do this. I'll leave. I'll go somewhere else. You'll never have to see me again." He shook her off. "And go where? Do what? You've got no skills, no husband, and a bastard on the way. You'd be dead in a week." He climbed down from the wagon. "At least this way you'll have a roof and food. More than you deserve." He came around to her side and pulled her down, not gently. His hand clamped around her upper arm as he marched her toward the platform. People were staring now. Clara recognized faces. Mrs. Chen from the general store, the Rawlings brothers who worked at the mill, Sarah Mitchell, who'd been her classmate years ago. Some looked shocked. Others looked away. None stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," her father called out, his voice taking on a formal tone that made Clara's skin crawl. "Thank you for coming. As posted, I'm here to settle a family matter. My daughter has proven herself incapable of decent conduct. She's brought shame on my household and created a burden I'm unwilling to bear. Therefore, in accordance with territorial law regarding dependents without means, I'm offering her labor contract to anyone willing to take on her maintenance." "This is insane," Clara said, her voice shaking. "You can't sell me like property." "I'm not selling you." His grip tightened. "I'm transferring responsibility. There's a difference." "The hell there is." A few people in the crowd looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. Clara felt panic rising in her throat. This was really happening. Her own father was auctioning her off in the town square like furniture. "The terms are simple," her father continued. "Whoever takes her gets her labor until the child is born and weaned. After that, the contract's void and she's free to go. I'm asking $50 to cover what I've spent on her maintenance these last months." $50. The price of a decent horse. Less than a plow. "Anyone interested can inspect the goods first." He pushed Clara forward onto the platform. She stumbled, catching herself against the post. Her coat fell open, revealing her pregnant belly clearly. A few people in the crowd muttered. Someone laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Clara wanted to run, but where? She was 8 months pregnant in the middle of winter. She'd freeze to death before she made it out of town. And her father was right about one thing. She had no skills, no money, no way to survive on her own. She was trapped. $50, her father called again. "That's all I'm asking. You'll get nearly a year's domestic labor out of her. She can cook, clean, sew well enough. And once the baby comes, well, that's not my concern anymore." A man stepped forward from the crowd. Abraham Fletcher, who owned the boarding house. He was in his 60s, with cold eyes and a reputation for working his staff half to death. "She looks sickly," Fletcher said, squinting at Clara. "How do I know she'll survive the birthing?" "That's your risk to take," her father replied. "But she's young and strong enough. She'll probably make it." Probably. Clara felt tears burning her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give these people the satisfaction. $40, Fletcher offered, and only because I need kitchen help. $50, her father countered. "Price is firm." Fletcher shrugged and stepped back. Not worth it. The crowd shifted, uncomfortable. Clara saw pity on some faces now, but still, no one intervened. This was legal, after all. Distasteful, maybe, but legal. And in a frontier town where survival was hard enough, people didn't interfere in family business. "Come now," her father said, irritation creeping into his voice. $50 for a year's labor? That's a bargain. Someone must need help. Silence. Clara stood there, shaking in the cold, feeling every eye on her. She'd never felt so small, so worthless. This was what her life had come to, standing on an auction block while strangers decided if she was worth the price of a horse. 45, someone called out. A woman's voice. Clara turned to see Margaret Talbot, who ran the dress shop. She looked apologetic but practical. "I could use help with the sewing, and I'd treat her decent." Clara's father frowned. 50. 45 is all I can spare. Then it's not enough. Margaret shook her head and backed away. Clara felt something inside her crack. Even sympathy had a price limit. "Anyone else?" her father demanded. "Surely someone here can see the value." "I'll take her." The voice came from the back of the crowd, and everyone turned. Clara's breath caught. The man walking forward was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders under a heavy canvas coat. His dark hair was long, touching his collar, and his face was weathered in a way that made his age hard to guess. Could be 35. Could be 50. But what struck Clara most were his eyes, pale gray, like ice water, and completely unreadable. Elias Crow. Even Clara, who'd been isolated in her father's cellar for weeks, knew the name. Everyone in Bitterroot knew the name. Elias Crow, the mountain man who lived somewhere up in the high country, who came to town maybe twice a year to trade furs and buy supplies. The stories about him varied. Some said he'd been a soldier who'd seen too much violence and couldn't live among people anymore. Others claimed he'd killed a man back east and was hiding from the law. A few whispered he was simply mad, preferring wolves and silence to human company. No one really knew, and no one asked. You didn't ask Elias Crow questions. He walked through the crowd like it wasn't there, his boots crunching in the snow. When he reached the platform, he looked up at Clara with those pale eyes. She couldn't read anything in them. $50? He asked her father. That's right. William Whitmore's voice had changed, become uncertain. You want to take on the contract? I asked the price. That means I'm interested. Well, yes, but didn't expect. Her father was clearly unsettled. You live up in the mountains, alone. That's no place for a woman in her condition. Then you shouldn't be selling her. The words were quiet, but cut like a blade. William flushed. I'm not selling her, I'm transferring responsibility. I heard. Elias reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. He counted out coins onto the platform edge, gold eagles mostly, glinting in the weak sunlight. $50, contract's mine. Now hold on. You set a price. I met it. That's how sales work. Elias looked at Clara again. Get your things. I don't have things, Clara said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Everything I own is what I'm wearing. Something flickered in those gray eyes, anger maybe, or disgust, but not at her. Then come down. Clara moved toward the steps, but her father grabbed her arm. Wait, I should know where you're taking her in case there are questions later. There won't be questions. Elias picked up the coins he'd laid down and held them out. You sold her. Transaction's complete. Where I take her and what happens next is none of your concern. She's still my daughter. No. Elias's voice went hard. She stopped being your daughter the moment you put her on this block. Take the money or don't. Makes no difference to me. But if you take it, you lose the right to ask questions. William Whitmore stood there, his face working through several emotions. Pride, shame, greed. In the end, greed won. He took the coins. Elias turned away from him like he'd ceased to exist. He looked up at Clara. Can you walk? Yes. Then let's go. She came down the steps carefully, her body awkward. When she reached the ground, Elias didn't touch her or offer help. He just started walking toward the edge of the square where a large horse stood waiting, a gray gelding with patient eyes and saddlebags that looked well used. Clara followed, aware of every eye tracking her movement. The crowd parted silently. No one spoke. What was there to say? She'd been sold. Elias reached his horse and began checking the straps on his saddlebags, his back to her. Clara stood there, shivering, waiting for… what? Instructions? Threats? She had no idea what came next. You know how to ride? He asked without turning around. Not well. Doesn't matter. You'll ride in front. I'll handle the horse. He finally looked at her. We've got about 6 hours to my place. Maybe more in this snow. Can you manage that? 6 hours into the mountains. Clara looked past him at the white peaks rising in the distance. She'd never been up there. Few people had. The high country was brutal, beautiful and deadly and empty. Do I have a choice? She asked. You always have a choice. His voice was flat. You can stay here. Try your luck with whoever else wants to buy your contract, or you can come with me. Either way, decide now. I'm not waiting. Clara looked back at the town square. Her father was already walking away, the coins in his pocket. The crowd was dispersing, the show over. No one looked at her. She was already forgotten. She turned back to Elias. I'll come with you. He nodded once, then moved to help her mount. His hands were careful, impersonal, as he lifted her onto the horse's back. She settled into position as best she could with her belly, gripping the saddle horn. Elias swung up behind her, his body a solid wall at her back, and took the reins. Hold on, he said. Then they were moving. The town fell away behind them as Elias guided the horse onto the mountain trail. Clara watched Bitterroot shrink into the distance, the wooden buildings, the church steeple, the smoke from chimneys rising into the gray sky. Everything she'd ever known, disappearing. She should be terrified. She was riding into the wilderness with a stranger who'd just bought her like property. She was 8 months pregnant, weak from poor food and cold nights, and headed toward a place no one else wanted to go. But what surprised her was that she didn't feel terror. She felt numb, empty, like something inside her had finally broken completely, and now there was nothing left to feel. The horse's steady rhythm was almost soothing. Behind her, Elias sat silent, his breathing even. He smelled like wood smoke and leather and something else. Pine, maybe. Clean, at least. That was something. They rode for an hour in complete silence. The trail grew steeper, winding up through stands of lodgepole pine. Snow began to fall, light at first, then heavier. Clara's fingers went numb even inside her thin gloves. "There's an extra coat in the left saddlebag," Elias said suddenly. "Take it." Clara fumbled with the bag, her cold fingers clumsy. She pulled out a heavy wool coat, men's size but warm. She wrestled it on over her own thin coat. The difference was immediate. "Thank you," she said. He didn't respond. Another hour passed. The trail got rougher, the horse picking its way carefully over frozen ground. Claire's back started to ache from the awkward position, but she didn't complain. Complaining wouldn't help. "Why did you do it?" The question came out before she could stop it. "Do what?" "Buy my contract. You live alone. You don't need a domestic servant. Everyone knows that." Silence. Clara thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, "Your father's a fool." "That's not an answer?" "It's the only answer you're getting." More silence. The snow was falling harder now, and visibility was dropping. Clara couldn't see more than 20 feet ahead, but Elias seemed to know exactly where he was going, guiding the horse with subtle shifts of weight and gentle pressure on the reins. "How much farther?" Clara asked. 3, 4 hours. Depends on the snow." Her back was really hurting now, a dull ache spreading from her spine. And something else, a tightness in her belly that came and went. She'd been having those on and off for days. The midwife back in town, before Clara had been cast out, had said they were normal. Practice contractions, preparing the body for the real thing, but they seemed stronger today. Clara shifted position, trying to find comfort. There wasn't any. Behind her, Elias's body was warm and solid, his presence strangely steadying. She found herself leaning back slightly, just to take some pressure off her spine. He didn't pull away or comment, just kept riding. "What happens when we get there?" Clara asked after another mile. "You'll have a room, food, shelter. And in return, you do what work you can, when you can. I'm not unreasonable." "Everyone says you're dangerous." She felt more than heard his exhale. "And everyone said you were a whore who got what she deserved. People say a lot of things. Doesn't make them true." The words hit harder than Clara expected. Not because they were cruel, because they were honest. She'd spent weeks drowning in shame, believing the things people said about her, believing she deserved her father's contempt, the town's rejection, all of it. But hearing Elias say it so bluntly, with such clear disbelief in the judgment, it cracked something open in her chest. "I'm not a whore," she said quietly. "Didn't say you were." "I loved him, Thomas. He said we'd marry." "What happened?" "He left. When I told him about the baby, he left for Boston. His father gave him money to disappear." Clara's voice cracked. "He didn't even say goodbye." Elias was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Men who run aren't men. They're cowards in men's clothing." It was such a simple statement, but it hit Clara like absolution. She'd spent months blaming herself, wondering what she'd done wrong, how she'd failed to keep Thomas's love. But Elias's words reframed everything. Thomas was the failure, not her. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For saying that." He didn't respond, but his arm shifted slightly, a barely perceptible gesture that felt almost protective. They climbed higher. The landscape changed as they ascended. The trees grew thicker, the snow deeper. Clara saw animal tracks crossing the trail, deer, elk, something with paw prints too large to be a dog. Wolf, probably. Or worse. "Are there bears up here?" she asked. "They're sleeping. Winter denning." "Wolves?" "Yes." "Do they attack people?" "Not usually. They're more afraid of you than you are of them." He paused. "Usually." That wasn't comforting. The tightness in Clara's belly came again, stronger this time. She caught her breath, pressing a hand to her side. It passed after a moment, but it left her uneasy. "You all right?" Elias asked. "Fine." "Don't lie. Not to me. If something's wrong, say so." Clara hesitated. "I've been having these pains, tightness. They come and go." "How often?" "I don't know. Every hour, maybe? Sometimes less? She felt his body tense behind her. How long has this been happening? A few days. The midwife said it was normal. When did you last see the midwife? 3 weeks ago. He cursed under his breath. A short, sharp word Clara had only heard from drunk men in town. We need to move faster. Why? What's wrong? Might be nothing. Might be early labor. Either way, I'd rather not find out while we're still 2 hours from shelter. He urged the horse into a faster walk, as fast as was safe on the snowy trail. Clara gripped the saddle horn tighter, her heart starting to race. Early labor? She wasn't due for another month at least. That couldn't be right. But the tightness came again, and this time it brought a sharper pain with it. Clara bit her lip to keep from crying out. Talk to me, Elias said. Keep talking, it'll help. Help what? Help you stay calm, and help me know you're still conscious. His voice was steady, controlled. Tell me about yourself. Where you grew up. Anything. Clara's mind went blank with pain, then the contraction, if that's what it was, passed. She took a shaky breath. I grew up in Bitterroot. Never lived anywhere else. Parents? My mother died when I was 12. Fever. After that, it was just my father and me. He ever treat you well before all this? Clara thought about it. He wasn't cruel, but he wasn't warm. Everything was about propriety, reputation, what people thought. She laughed bitterly. Guess I ruined that. You didn't ruin anything. You trusted someone who didn't deserve it. That's not a sin. Another contraction. Stronger. Clara leaned forward, breathing through it. When it passed, she felt wetness on her cheeks and realized she was crying. How much longer? She asked. Hour and a half, maybe less. Elias shifted his grip on the reins. You're doing fine. Just breathe. I'm scared. I know. What if the baby comes before we get there? Then we deal with it. His voice was calm, certain. But we're not there yet. Don't borrow trouble. Clara tried to focus on the rhythm of the horse's movement, the steady fall of snow, anything but the fear clawing at her chest. Another contraction came. Then another. They were getting closer together. This was really happening. Through the falling snow, Clara caught glimpses of the landscape around them. Towering pines, sheer rock faces, frozen streams. It was beautiful and terrible and vast. She'd never felt so small. There, Elias said suddenly. Clara looked up. Through the snow, she could make out a structure, a cabin, solid and square, built against the side of the mountain. Smoke rose from the chimney. Windows glowed with firelight. Home. Elias guided the horse up the last section of trail and stopped in front of the cabin. He dismounted quickly, then reached up to help Clara down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground. Inside, Elias ordered. Now! He all but carried her through the door. The interior hit Clara like a wall of warmth, blessed heat from a large stone fireplace. The cabin was one large room with a sleeping loft above. Simple, clean, solid furniture and shelves lined with books. Elias guided her to a chair near the fire. Sit. Don't move. He disappeared into a back room and returned with blankets, water, and a bottle of something that looked medicinal. He knelt in front of her, his gray eyes intense. How far apart are the pains now? I don't know. Close. Maybe 10 minutes? And when did your water break? My what? He closed his eyes briefly. Has anything leaked? Any fluid? No. All right, that's good. He stood. I need to tend the horse, then I'll help you get settled. Can you sit here for 5 minutes without falling over? I think so. Good. He was out the door before she could ask any questions. Clara sat there, shaking, from cold, from fear, from exhaustion. Another contraction came, and she gripped the arms of the chair hard enough to hurt. This was insane. She was in the middle of nowhere with a stranger, possibly going into labor a month early, and she had no idea what happened next. But as she looked around the cabin, at the well-stocked shelves, the carefully banked fire, the clean floors and sturdy walls, she realized something. She felt safer here than she had in weeks. Elias came back inside, snow dusting his shoulders. He stripped off his coat and went immediately to the fireplace, building up the flames. Then he filled a large pot with water and hung it over the fire to heat. "There's a bedroom through there," he said, pointing to a door in the back. "It's yours now. I'll sleep in the loft." "You don't have to." "I do. You need privacy and space. You'll have both." He moved to one of the shelves and started pulling down jars and bottles. "I've delivered foals and calves, even helped with a human birth once, years ago, so I know the basics, but I'm not a doctor. There's no doctor for 50 miles. Exactly, so we work with what we have." He brought the supplies to a small table near her chair. "First thing, when was the last time you ate?" Clara tried to remember. "Yesterday morning, maybe." His jaw tightened, but he didn't comment. He just went to the shelf and came back with bread, cheese, and dried meat. "Eat. Even if you don't want to. Your body needs fuel." She took the food with shaking hands and forced herself to eat. It tasted better than anything she'd had in months. Real food. Enough of it. "Why are you helping me?" Claire asked between bites. "You don't know me. You could have left me in town." Elias was quiet for a moment, organizing the medical supplies with precise movements. "I knew your mother." Claire's head snapped up. "What?" "Catherine Whitmore. I knew her years ago, before she married your father." He glanced at Clara, and something softened in his face. "You look like her." "You knew my mother?" "We grew up in the same town, back east, Pennsylvania. She was kind, funny, full of life." His expression darkened. "Then she married William Whitmore and moved out here. I lost track of her after that." "Why didn't you ever visit or write?" "Because I wasn't welcome. Your father made that clear." Elias stood. Catherine deserved better than what she got. A cold husband, a hard life, an early grave. When I saw you up on that block today, looking just like her, he shook his head. I couldn't walk away. Not again. Clara felt tears burning her eyes again. "She never mentioned you." "I'm not surprised. Your father probably forbade it. He moved to check the water heating over the fire. But she was a good woman. And I'm guessing she raised a good daughter. So here we are." Another contraction hit, harder than before. Clara doubled over, gasping. Elias was at her side immediately, his hand steady on her shoulder. "Breathe," he said. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. Don't fight it." Clara tried to follow his instructions. The pain peaked, held, then slowly ebbed. When she could breathe again, she looked up at Elias. "I'm not sure I can do this," she whispered. "You can. You will." His gray eyes held hers. "You're stronger than you know, Clara Whitmore. You survived your father's cruelty and a town's judgment. You'll survive this too." "How do you know?" "Because you're Catherine's daughter. And she was the strongest person I ever knew." The words settled over Clara like a blanket. Her mother. She barely remembered her anymore, just fragments of warmth, laughter, gentle hands. But knowing that Elias had known her, had cared about her, somehow made Clara feel less alone. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet. We've got a long night ahead." He was right. As darkness fell outside and the wind picked up, Clara's labor intensified. The contractions came faster, harder, each one stealing her breath. Elias stayed with her through all of it, bringing water, adjusting pillows, talking her through the worst moments with steady calm. He never seemed frightened or uncertain, just focused. Hours blurred together. Clara lost track of time. There was only pain and breath and Elias's voice guiding her through. "You're doing fine. Stay with me. Breathe." At some point he helped her to the bedroom, a simple space with a large bed, clean linens, and a window looking out at the snowy forest. He'd built up a fire in a second fireplace there, and the room was warm. Clara collapsed onto the bed, exhausted. Every muscle in her body ached. "How much longer?" she gasped. "Hard to say. Could be hours yet, could be less." Elias checked the supplies he'd laid out on the bedside table. "But we're through the worst of the preparation. Now we just wait." "I can't." "You can, and you will." He met her eyes. "You're not alone in this, Clara. I'm here. I'll stay here. Whatever happens, you're not alone." The words broke something loose in Clara's chest. A sob. Or maybe a laugh. She couldn't tell. But it felt like release. She wasn't alone. For the first time in months, she wasn't alone. The night wore on. The storm outside grew fierce, wind screaming around the cabin walls. But inside, the fire burned steady, and Elias stayed true to his word. He never left her side. Part 2. Dawn came gray and reluctant, filtering through the bedroom window in pale strips. Clara had been awake for hours, not that she could have slept anyway. The contractions had slowed sometime around 3 in the morning, spacing out to 20 minutes apart, then 30. Elias had checked on her one last time, determined the baby wasn't coming immediately, and told her to rest while she could. She'd tried, but rest felt impossible when her entire world had shifted so completely in less than 24 hours. She lay now in the bed, staring at the rough-hewn ceiling beams, her hand on her belly. The baby moved inside her, a rolling shift that made her skin ripple. Still alive. Still safe. For now. Through the partially open door, she could hear Elias moving around in the main room, the sound of wood being added to the fire, the scrape of a kettle. Normal sounds, domestic sounds. It felt surreal. Clara pushed herself upright, wincing at the ache in her back. She needed to use the chamber pot, a humiliating necessity she'd been dreading. But Elias had left one in the corner of the room, discreetly covered with a cloth, and she forced herself to deal with it. Her body was a traitor these days, clumsy and demanding. When she emerged from the bedroom, fully dressed in the same clothes she'd worn yesterday, Elias was at the stove. He'd changed his shirt but looked like he hadn't slept at all. His gray eyes flicked to her, assessing. Contractions? Stopped, mostly. That happens sometimes. False labor, your body practicing. He poured hot water into a cup and brought it to the table. Sit, drink this. Clara obeyed, sinking into the chair. The cup smelled like pine needles and something else she couldn't identify. What is it? Tea. Raspberry leaf. It's supposed to help with labor when the time comes. Won't hurt you either way. He went back to the stove and returned with a plate. Eggs, fried potatoes, bread. More food than Clara had seen in weeks. I can't eat all this, she said. You can and you will. You're eating for 2, and you're half starved. His tone left no room for argument. Clara picked up the fork and started eating. The eggs were perfectly cooked, the potatoes seasoned with salt and some herbs she didn't recognize. After 3 bites, she realized she was ravenous. She cleaned the plate while Elias watched in silence, drinking his own tea. Better, he said when she finished. Where did you learn to cook? Living alone, you learn or you starve. He took her empty plate. I'll teach you my methods if you want, or you can cook your own way. Your choice. Clara blinked. You're giving me a choice? Why wouldn't I? Because you bought my contract. You own my labor. Elias's expression hardened. I bought you out of a bad situation. That doesn't make you a slave. He set the plate in a washing basin. You'll work because you live here and I expect everyone to pull their weight, but you'll work as a partner, not property. There's a difference. What if I don't know how to do something? Then you learn. I'm not unreasonable, Clara. I don't expect perfection. I expect effort. It was such a simple statement, but it cracked something open in Clara's chest. Her father had demanded perfection always, perfect behavior, perfect reputation, perfect obedience. And when she'd failed, he'd discarded her like trash. Elias was offering something different, something she didn't have a name for yet. Thank you, she said quietly. He nodded and turned to the shelves, pulling down jars and supplies. We need to talk about what comes next. The baby could come tomorrow or 3 weeks from now. Either way, you need to be prepared. I don't know how to prepare. That's why I'm telling you. He brought the supplies to the table. First, when labor really starts, you'll know. The contractions won't stop. They'll get stronger and closer together. When they're 5 minutes apart consistently, we're in active labor. Clara's heart started pounding. And then what? Then we deal with it. I've got clean linens, hot water, basic tools. I know how to help if things go wrong. He met her eyes. But I need you to tell me the truth about what you're feeling. No shame, no hiding. If something hurts wrong, if something feels off, you tell me immediately. Understood? Yes. Good. He opened one of the jars. This is ergot. If the bleeding gets bad after delivery, I'll give you a tea made from this. It'll help your body contract and stop the hemorrhaging. It tastes like hell, but it works. How do you know all this? I told you I've delivered animals, and I helped with a birth once, years ago. A trapper's wife went into labor early during a storm. I was the only one around. His jaw tightened. Both she and the baby survived, barely, but I learned what to look for. Clara swallowed hard. What do I need to look for? Excessive bleeding, more than you'd expect. Fever, convulsions, the baby not breathing when it comes out. He said it all matter-of-factly, like reciting a recipe. Any of those things happen, we act fast, but most births go fine if you don't panic. That's not comforting. It's not meant to be comforting. It's meant to be honest. He closed the jar. You want me to lie and tell you everything will be perfect? No? Then we understand each other. A contraction chose that moment to hit, not as strong as the ones last night, but enough to make Clara catch her breath. Elias watched her carefully until it passed. How long? He asked. Maybe a minute. And the last one? Half an hour ago. He nodded. Still false labor, probably, but we're getting closer. He stood. I need to check the traps and bring in more firewood. Storm's clearing, but there's another one coming tomorrow. Can you stay put for an hour? Clara almost laughed. Where would I go? Fair point. He pulled on his coat. Don't lift anything heavy. Don't try to clean or organize. Just rest. I can't just sit here doing nothing. You're growing a human being. That's not nothing. He paused at the door. There are books on the shelf if you want something to do. Help yourself. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a solid thunk. Clara sat alone in the cabin, listening to the crackling fire. Slowly she stood and walked to the bookshelves. They were packed. Leather-bound volumes, some new, some clearly old. She ran her fingers over the spines, reading titles. Homer, Shakespeare, Dickens, Darwin, technical manuals on trapping and survival, medical texts, philosophy. Elias Crow, the dangerous mountain hermit, had a better library than the Bitterroot schoolhouse. She pulled down a worn copy of Jane Eyre and settled back into the chair. The pages smelled like old paper and wood smoke. She opened to the first chapter and began to read. Time slipped by. The fire burned steady. Outside, she could hear the muffled sounds of Elias working, the thunk of an axe splitting wood, the creak of the shed door. Normal sounds, safe sounds. Clara read until her eyes grew heavy, then let the book fall closed in her lap. She dozed, half aware, until the door opened again and cold air rushed in. Elias stamped snow from his boots, his arms full of firewood. He stacked it neatly by the hearth without saying anything, then disappeared into the back room. When he returned, he'd changed into dry clothes and his hair was damp. There's a bathing room back there, he said, catching her stare. Small, but functional. You can use it whenever you want. I'll heat water for you later if you'd like. A bath. Clara couldn't remember the last time she'd had a proper bath. In her father's cellar, she'd made do with a bucket and a rag. I'd like that, she said. After lunch, then. He moved to the stove and started preparing food again. Clara watched him work, noticing the economy of his movements. Nothing wasted, everything purposeful. Can I help? She asked. Not today. Maybe tomorrow, if you're feeling up to it. He glanced at her. How's the reading? Good. I didn't know you had so many books. Winter gets long up here. Books help. He stirred something in a pot. Stew, from the smell of it. You can read any of them you want. I don't have much use for them anymore, except on the coldest nights. Why not? Because I've read them all 3 times over. There's only so much Shakespeare a man can take before he starts talking to himself in iambic pentameter. Clara actually smiled at that. Do you talk to yourself? Sometimes. The horse is a terrible conversationalist. He ladled stew into 2 bowls. Fair warning, I'm not much for small talk. I've lived alone for 8 years. My social graces are rusty. I don't need social graces, I need honesty. Then we'll get along fine. They ate together in comfortable silence. The stew was thick with venison, potatoes, carrots, rich and warming. Clara ate slowly, savoring every bite. When they finished, Elias cleared the dishes and started heating water for her bath. It took 3 trips to fill the copper tub in the bathing room. When it was ready, Elias left her alone with a towel and a bar of rough soap. Clara undressed carefully, her body awkward and heavy, and lowered herself into the water. The heat was heaven. She let herself sink down until the water covered her shoulders, her belly rising like an island. For the first time in months, she felt clean. Really clean. She washed her hair with the soap, scrubbing her scalp until it tingled, washed her body, her swollen feet, every part of her that had been neglected. The water turned gray, but she didn't care. When she finally climbed out, shivering, she felt more human than she had since this nightmare began. She dressed in her same clothes, they were all she had, and emerged to find Elias adding more wood to the fire. He looked up, took in her damp hair and clean face, and nodded. Better? Much. Good. He gestured to a bundle on the table. I found some old clothes that might fit you. Shirts, mostly. They'll be big, but they're clean and warm. Take what you need. Clara picked through the bundle. Men's flannel shirts, wool socks, a pair of suspenders. All too large, but all serviceable. She felt tears prick her eyes at the simple kindness of it. Thank you, she managed. Elias looked uncomfortable. It's just clothes. It's more than anyone else has given me in months. He didn't respond to that, just turned back to the fire. But Clara saw the tension in his shoulders, the tightness in his jaw. He was angry on her behalf, she realized. Angry at her father, at the town, at everyone who'd failed her. It was strange to have someone angry for her instead of at her. The afternoon passed quietly. Clara changed into one of the flannel shirts, soft and warm and smelling faintly of cedar. She sat by the fire and read while Elias worked on something in the corner, carving wood with quick, precise movements. What are you making? She asked. Spoon. The last one cracked. He held up the half-formed piece. Wood carving passes the time. Can you teach me? He looked surprised. You want to learn? I want to be useful, and I'll go crazy if I just sit here for weeks. Elias considered this, then nodded. All right, but not with a sharp knife, not in your condition. You can sand and finish pieces I've already carved. That help? Yes. He brought her a carved bowl that needed smoothing and a piece of sandpaper, showed her how to work with the grain, how to feel for rough spots. Clara worked slowly, carefully, focusing on the repetitive motion. It was soothing. They worked in silence until the light started to fade. Elias lit lanterns and started preparing dinner, more venison, this time roasted with herbs. The cabin filled with the smell of cooking meat and wood smoke. Clara's back was aching again, and the contractions had returned. Irregular, but present. She didn't mention them. No point worrying Elias if it was just more false labor. But as they ate dinner, one hit hard enough to make her gasp. Elias's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. How long between them? I don't know, 15 minutes maybe. How long has it been going on? Since this afternoon. His eyes narrowed. And you didn't think to mention it? I didn't want to worry you if it wasn't real. Clara. His voice was firm but not angry. I need you to tell me these things. I can't help if I don't know what's happening. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, just communicate. He stood. Come on, let's get you to bed. If this is real labor starting, you need to rest while you can. He helped her to the bedroom and made sure she was comfortable, piling pillows behind her back. Then he brought the medical supplies and set them on the bedside table. I'm staying in here tonight, he said. I'll sleep in the chair. If anything changes, you wake me immediately. You don't have to. I do. And I will. He settled into the chair by the fireplace, stretching his long legs out. Try to sleep. Clara lay in the darkness, listening to Elias's steady breathing. Another contraction came, then another, but they didn't get closer together, didn't intensify. Eventually, exhausted, she drifted into uneasy sleep. She woke to gray dawn light and the sound of wind. The storm Elias had predicted was here. She could hear it howling around the cabin, rattling the shutters. Snow hissed against the windows. Elias was already up, building the fire back to life. He glanced over when he heard her stirring. Contractions? They stopped again. He nodded. Your body's taking its time. That's all right. First babies are usually slow. He brought her water and bread. Storm's going to last at least 2 days. We're snowed in, but we've got plenty of supplies. Clara sat up, accepting the food. Have you ever been trapped up here during a storm? Every winter, sometimes for weeks. He moved to the window, looking out at the white chaos. It's part of life in the high country. You learn to prepare. Doesn't it drive you crazy, being alone that long? No. He said it simply, without elaboration. Clara studied him, this strange, quiet man who'd bought her freedom and asked for nothing in return. Why do you live up here, Elias? Really? He was quiet for a long time, then, because down there I was expected to be someone I couldn't be. Up here, I can just exist. What were you expected to be? A good son, a soldier, a gentleman. His voice was flat. I failed at all three. I don't believe that. Believe what you want. He turned from the window. I'll make breakfast. You rest. But Clara didn't rest. As the storm raged outside, she found herself thinking about what Elias had said, about expectations and failure, about being someone you couldn't be. She understood that more than he probably realized. The day passed slowly. The storm made the cabin feel smaller, more intimate. Clara read. Elias carved. They ate together, washed dishes together, existed in the same space with surprising ease. That night, Clara woke to another contraction, stronger than before. Then another. She tried to breathe through them quietly, not wanting to wake Elias. But he was already awake, moving to her side. How far apart? 10 minutes, maybe less. How long has this been happening? An hour? He felt her forehead, checking for fever. Any other symptoms? Bleeding? Pain that doesn't feel like contractions? No, just this. All right? He sat on the edge of the bed. We're going to wait and see. If they keep coming regularly for another hour, we'll know it's real. They waited. The contractions continued, steady, insistent. Clara gripped the sheets, breathing through each one, while Elias coached her with quiet instructions. Don't hold your breath. Let it out. That's it. After 90 minutes, he stood. This is it. You're in labor. Clara's heart jumped into her throat. Now? In the middle of a storm? Babies don't check the weather. He moved efficiently, preparing the room. Clean linens, hot water, supplies laid out within reach. We're ready for this. You're ready for this. I'm not. You are. You just don't know it yet. He came back to her side. I need to check your progress. It's going to be uncomfortable, but I need to know how dilated you are. Can you handle that? Clara nodded, mortified but understanding the necessity. Elias was clinical, quick, professional. When he finished, he washed his hands and met her eyes. You're at 5 centimeters, halfway there. This could take hours still, or it could go fast. Either way, we're committed now. The next hours were a blur of pain and pressure, and Elias's steady voice guiding her through. The storm screamed outside, shaking the cabin walls. Inside, Clara fought a different battle, her body trying to bring new life into a world that had shown her mostly cruelty. But Elias stayed. Through every contraction, every cry of pain, every moment of doubt, he stayed. I can't do this, Clara gasped at one point, exhausted and shaking. You're already doing it, Elias said. You've been doing it for hours. You're almost there. It hurts. I know. I'm scared. I know that too. He took her hand, his grip strong and steady. But you're not alone. Whatever happens, you're not alone. The words gave Clara something to hold on to. She bore down through the next contraction, and the next, and the next. Time lost meaning. There was only pain and breath, and Elias's voice. And then, pressure. Unbearable pressure. The baby's crowning, Elias said, his voice tight with focus. Next contraction, you push. Hard as you can. Clara pushed, screamed, pushed again. That's it. Again, don't stop. One more push and suddenly the pressure released. A thin, reedy cry filled the cabin, small and indignant and perfect. It's a girl, Elias said, his voice rough with emotion. He worked quickly, clearing the baby's airway, wrapping her in clean linen. Then he placed her on Clara's chest. Clara looked down at the tiny, red-faced creature in her arms and felt everything inside her shift. Her daughter, small and perfect and alive. "She's beautiful," Clara whispered. "She is." Elias's hand was gentle on the baby's head. "You did well, Clara." The afterbirth came minutes later, and Elias handled it with the same calm efficiency he'd shown through everything else. He checked Clara for excessive bleeding, gave her the ergot tea he'd warned her about, and made sure both she and the baby were stable. Then he sat back, exhausted, and ran a hand through his hair. "We made it," he said. "We did." Clara couldn't stop staring at her daughter. "Thank you for everything." "Don't thank me yet. Now comes the hard part, keeping her alive." But he said it with something that might have been a smile. The storm continued outside, but inside the cabin something had shifted. Clara held her daughter close, feeling the tiny heartbeat against her chest. This small, fragile life that depended entirely on her. She'd thought she was broken, useless, worthless, but she'd just done something impossible. She'd survived. And now, with Elias's help, she'd make sure her daughter survived too. The world outside might be cruel and cold and unforgiving. But in this cabin, in this moment, they were safe. The baby's crying woke Clara 3 hours later. She'd barely slept, her body wrung out and aching, but the sound jolted her into full alertness. Her daughter, she still hadn't given her a name, was fussing in the makeshift cradle Elias had fashioned from a wooden crate lined with soft blankets. Clara tried to sit up and gasped at the pain. Everything hurt. Her back, her legs, places she didn't have names for. Elias appeared in the doorway almost instantly, carrying a cup of something that steamed. "Don't try to move too fast," he said. "Your body just went through a war." "She's crying." "I know, that's what babies do." He set the cup on the bedside table. "Can you feed her, or do you need help?" Clara had never felt more incompetent in her life. "I don't know how." "Instinct, mostly." Elias lifted the baby with surprising gentleness and brought her to Clara. "Hold her like this. She'll find what she needs." It took several awkward minutes, the baby rooting frantically while Clara tried to figure out what she was doing. But eventually, the baby latched on and began to nurse. The sensation was strange and uncomfortable and somehow right all at once. "There you go," Elias said. He handed Clara the cup, more of that raspberry leaf tea. "Drink this. You need to stay hydrated." Clara obeyed, drinking one-handed while the baby nursed. Outside, the storm was still raging. She could hear wind screaming around the cabin corners, snow pelting the windows. They were completely cut off from the world. "How long will this last?" she asked. "The storm. Another day at least. Maybe 2. Elias moved to check the fire in the bedroom fireplace. "We've got food and water for weeks. We're fine." I wasn't worried about that. "Then what?" Clara looked down at her daughter's tiny face. "What happens after? When the storm clears and spring comes? My father sold me for a year's labor, but after that..." She trailed off, not even sure what she was asking. Elias was quiet for a moment. "After that, you're free. The contract says so. You can go wherever you want." "With a baby and no money? Go where exactly?" "I don't know. That's not my decision to make." He turned to face her, his gray eyes unreadable. "But you've got months to figure it out. Don't borrow trouble." It wasn't the reassurance Clara wanted, but it was honest. She appreciated that more than empty promises. The baby finished nursing and fell asleep against Clara's chest. Elias took her gently and placed her back in the cradle, then helped Clara lie back down. "You should sleep," he said. "She'll wake again in a few hours. Rest while you can." "Where will you sleep?" "The loft. I've got things to do anyway, wood to split, supplies to organize." He paused at the door. "If you need anything, call out. I'll hear you." Then he was gone, leaving Clara alone with her sleeping daughter and her racing thoughts. She'd survived the birth. That was something. But now came the harder part, actually raising a child in the middle of nowhere, with no clear future and a past that still haunted her. Thomas's face flashed through her mind. His smile, his promises, his lies. She wondered if he ever thought about her. Probably not. He was in Boston now, living whatever life his father's money could buy, while she was trapped in a mountain cabin with a stranger and a newborn. Clara felt anger rising in her chest, hot and bitter. Not at Elias or her situation, at Thomas, at her father, at every person who'd failed her. The baby stirred, making small noises in her sleep. Clara watched her tiny chest rise and fall, her perfect miniature hands curled into fists. She'd done this, created this person. It didn't erase the shame or the betrayal, but it was something real, something that belonged to her alone. The next days blurred together in a haze of feeding, sleeping, and slowly recovering. The storm finally broke on the third day, leaving behind 4 feet of fresh snow and a world transformed into white silence. Elias dug paths from the cabin to the woodshed, the outhouse, the small stable where he kept his horse. Clara watched from the window, the baby in her arms, and felt the isolation settling over her like a weight. They were completely alone up here. No neighbors for miles. No help if something went wrong. Just Elias, Clara, and an infant who depended on them for everything. "You need a name," Clara said to the baby, who was nursing again. She'd fallen into a rhythm now, feed every 3 hours, sleep in between, change the cloth diapers Elias had improvised from old shirts. It was exhausting but manageable. She thought about her mother, Catherine, about the stories Elias had told, a woman who was kind and funny and full of life. A woman who'd been trapped in a cold marriage and died too young. "Catherine," Clara said softly. "I'll call you Catherine. Cat for short." The baby's eyes were closed, her tiny mouth working at Clara's breast. She didn't respond to the name, of course, but Clara felt something settle in her chest, a decision made, a small piece of control claimed. When Elias came back inside, stomping snow from his boots, Clara told him. "Catherine," he repeated. His expression softened. "Your mother would have liked that. Tell me more about her, please." Elias hung his coat and moved to the fire, warming his hands. "What do you want to know?" "Anything, everything. My father never talked about her. It was like she never existed." "That sounds like William." Elias's voice went hard. He wanted to erase anything that reminded him of failure. "And losing Catherine. That was his biggest failure, even if he'd never admit it." "How did they meet?" "Church social back in Pennsylvania. Catherine was 17, William was 25. He was the educated one, the schoolmaster. She was just a farmer's daughter. But she was smart. Smarter than half the men in town. She read everything she could get her hands on." Clara felt tears pricking her eyes. "That's where I got it from, the reading." "Probably." Elias settled into a chair. "William courted her properly, convinced her father he could give her a better life. And maybe he believed it at the time. But after they married and moved out here, something in him turned cold, like he resented her for not being the perfect wife he'd imagined." "What was she like?" "Really?" "Stubborn, quick to laugh. She had this way of seeing through people's nonsense." Elias's eyes went distant. "We grew up near each other. I was the blacksmith's son. Rough around the edges, not much for schooling, but Catherine never treated me like I was less than. We were friends, good friends." "Just friends?" He met her gaze. "I loved her. But she married your father, and that was that. I left town not long after, ended up out here eventually." Clara absorbed this, rocking Cat gently. "Do you regret not telling her how you felt?" "Every day." He stood abruptly. "But we don't always get what we want. We get what we get, and we make the best of it." He went to the stove and started preparing lunch, the conversation clearly over. Clara didn't push. She understood some wounds ran too deep for casual discussion. Over the next 2 weeks, a routine developed. Clara recovered slowly, her body healing in increments. Elias taught her how to manage the wood stove, how to make bread from scratch, how to render fat and cure meat, simple skills he'd mastered over years of solitude. Clara proved a quick study, though her hands were clumsy at first. The work helped, gave her something to focus on besides the uncertainty of her future. And Cat grew, gaining weight and strength, her tiny features becoming more defined each day. "She looks like you," Elias observed one evening as Clara fed the baby by the fire. "You think so?" "Around the eyes, and the chin." He was carving again, another spoon taking shape under his knife. "She's got your stubbornness, too, the way she hollers when she wants something. Clara smiled. Is that a compliment? It's an observation, but his tone was warm. They fell into companionable silence. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance, a long, lonely sound that made Clara shiver despite the fire's heat. Are they close? She asked. Close enough to hear, but they won't come near the cabin. Not with the fire and human smell. Elias didn't look up from his carving. They're more afraid of us than we are of them. You said that before. I'm not sure I believe it. Believe what you want. But I've lived up here 8 years and never been attacked. You learn to coexist. Clara wondered what it would be like to live like this permanently, cut off from civilization, dependent on your own skills and the land's mercy. It seemed both terrifying and somehow appealing. No judgment, no shame, just survival. Do you ever miss it? She asked. The town? Other people? No? Not even a little? Elias finally looked up. What's there to miss? People talking behind your back, judging everything you do, expecting you to fit into boxes that were never made for you? He shook his head. I'll take the wolves. Clara understood that more than she wanted to admit. March arrived with slightly warmer days and longer stretches of sunlight. The snow began to melt in earnest, revealing muddy trails and the first hints of green in protected valleys. Clara had been at the cabin for nearly 6 weeks now, and Kat was thriving, already outgrowing the smallest clothes Elias had scrounged up. Clara was stronger too, her body mostly healed, though she still tired easily. She'd taken over most of the cooking and cleaning, finding satisfaction in the domestic work. It was simple and honest, with clear results, unlike her life before, where nothing she did had ever been enough. One morning, Elias came back from checking his trap lines with news. Trail's clear enough to get to town, he said, hanging his coat. I need to go down for supplies in the next week or two. Flour, salt, a few other things we're running low on. Clara's heart jumped. Can I come? He looked at her carefully. You sure you want to? No, but I need to eventually. I can't hide up here forever. You're not hiding. You're recovering. But he nodded. If you want to come, you can. But we bring Kat. I'm not leaving her up here alone, and you can't be away from her for that long yet. The thought of facing Bitterroot again made Clara's stomach churn. But Elias was right. She couldn't hide forever, and maybe seeing people would help her figure out what came next. They planned to leave in 4 days, once the trail dried a bit more. Clara used the time to prepare, washing clothes and organizing Kat's things. The baby was too young to understand what was happening, but Clara felt the weight of it. Going back to the place that had rejected her. Facing the people who'd watched her father sell her off and done nothing. But she wouldn't be the same person who'd stood on that auction block. She was stronger now. A mother. A survivor. The night before they were set to leave, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed with Kat beside her in the cradle, listening to the baby's soft breathing and her own racing thoughts. A knock on the door frame made her start. Elias stood there, silhouetted by firelight from the main room. You all right? He asked. Can't sleep. Worried about tomorrow? Yes. He stepped into the room and sat in the chair by the fireplace, the same chair he'd occupied the night Kat was born. You don't have to do this. I can go alone. I need to face it eventually. Not until you're ready. Clara sat up carefully, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. Will I ever be ready? I don't know. Maybe not. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But here's what I do know. You're not the same person you were 6 weeks ago. You're stronger, tougher, and you've got nothing to be ashamed of. Tell that to the people in town. I don't care what they think. Neither should you. Easy to say when you've been hiding from them for 8 years. The words came out sharper than Clara intended. Elias's expression hardened, but he didn't get angry, just nodded slowly. Fair point. I did hide. Still do, I guess. He looked at the fire. After I came back from the war, I couldn't be around people anymore. Everything felt fake, all the social niceties and expectations. I'd seen what humans were capable of when the veneer came off. Couldn't pretend it didn't matter. Clara had never heard him talk about the war before. What did you see? Things that don't matter anymore. His jaw tightened. But they changed me, made it impossible to fit back into the life I'd left. So I stopped trying. Came out here and built something different. Don't you get lonely? Sometimes. But lonely is better than being surrounded by people and still feeling alone. He met her eyes. You know what that's like. She did. She'd felt it her entire life, alone in her father's house, alone in the town's judgment, alone even when Thomas had held her and promised forever. I don't want Kat to grow up like that, Clara said quietly. Isolated, cut off. Then we'll figure something else out. When the time comes. Elias stood. But for now, get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be hard enough without exhaustion making it worse. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Clara lay back down, Kat's small, warm presence beside her. Tomorrow she'd face her past. Tonight she'd rest. The ride down the mountain started at dawn. Elias had rigged a sling that allowed Clara to carry Kat against her chest, keeping the baby warm and secure. The horse moved carefully on the muddy trail, Elias guiding it with practiced ease. As they descended, the landscape changed. The high country's stark beauty gave way to lower valleys, then foothills. They passed a trapper's cabin, empty for the season, and a burned-out homestead that made Clara wonder what tragedy had happened there. Finally, late in the afternoon, Bitterroot came into view. The same wooden buildings, the same church steeple. It looked smaller than Clara remembered, less significant. Elias guided the horse down the main street. People stopped to stare. Clara kept her chin up, Kat bundled against her chest, and met their eyes without flinching. Let them look, let them judge. She didn't owe them anything. Elias stopped at the general store, Chen's Mercantile. Mrs. Chen was behind the counter, and her eyes widened when she saw them. Mr. Crow, Miss Whitmore. She looked between them uncertainly. I wasn't expecting to see you. Need supplies, Elias said flatly. He handed her a list. Can you fill this? Of course. Give me a few minutes. Mrs. Chen hurried into the back room. Clara stood awkwardly near the door, very aware of the other customers in the store. Two women she didn't know well were whispering near the fabric section. Abraham Fletcher was examining tools, his cold eyes flicking to Clara with obvious distaste. The bastard survived, I see, Fletcher said loudly. That's unfortunate. Clara felt ice slide down her spine. Before she could respond, Elias moved. He crossed the store in 3 long strides and got right in Fletcher's face. Say that again, Elias said quietly. I dare you. Fletcher stepped back, his face going pale. You were just running your mouth about things that aren't your concern. Keep it up and you'll be spitting teeth. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Mrs. Chen rushed back out from the stockroom. Gentlemen, please, there's no need for trouble. Elias stepped back but kept his eyes on Fletcher. No trouble. Just making sure we understand each other. Fletcher grabbed his things and left without another word. The women in the fabric section scurried out after him. Clara stood frozen, Kat pressed against her chest, her heart pounding. I'm sorry, Mrs. Chen said softly. People have been talking since your father announced the sale. It's been ugly. What's my father saying? Clara asked, finding her voice. Mrs. Chen looked uncomfortable. That you got what you deserved, that he did the Christian thing by finding you a home, even after your disgrace. She shook her head. I never agreed with it, Miss Whitmore. What he did was cruel. But I'm just a shopkeeper. I can't... I understand. Clara did. Mrs. Chen had her own business to protect. Thank you for the kindness you did show, Mrs. Chen finished gathering the supplies, flour, salt, coffee, other staples. Elias paid and loaded everything into the saddlebags. As they were preparing to leave, the door opened. William Whitmore walked in. Clara's father looked older than she remembered, grayer, harder. His eyes went to Clara, then to the baby, then to Elias. His expression never changed. I see the child lived, he said. Clara's hands tightened on Kat. Her name is Catherine. A presumptuous choice, naming it after her betters. She's not an it. She's my daughter. William's lip curled. The product of your sin. I'm sure Crow is enjoying his purchase. Elias moved between them before Clara could respond. Walk away, Whitmore. Right now. This is a public establishment. I have as much right. You have the right to leave before I throw you through that window. Elias's voice was deadly calm. Your choice. For a moment, Clara thought her father might actually stand his ground. But William Whitmore was a coward at heart. He always had been. He turned on his heel and walked out without another word. Clara was shaking. Not from fear, from rage. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to hurt him the way he'd hurt her. Instead, she stood there trembling while Kat fussed against her chest. Let's go, Elias said gently. There's nothing here worth staying for. They left the store and were preparing to mount the horse when a woman's voice called out. Clara Whitmore! Clara turned to see Sarah Mitchell, her former classmate, hurrying across the street. Sarah looked nervous but determined. I'm glad I caught you, Sarah said, slightly out of breath. I wanted to say, I'm sorry. For what happened? I should have spoken up that day in the square. I should have done something. Clara didn't know what to say. It's all right. It's not. None of it is. Sarah glanced at Kat. She's beautiful. Your daughter. Thank you. If you ever need anything, if you come back to town and need help, please know you can come to me. Sarah reached out and squeezed Clara's hand quickly. You deserve better than what you got. Then she was gone, hurrying back the way she'd come before anyone could see her talking to Clara too long. It was a small gesture, but it meant something. Elias helped Clara onto the horse, and they started back up the mountain trail. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Kat had fallen asleep against Clara's chest, her tiny warm weight comforting. You all right? Elias asked after a few miles. I don't know. Clara watched the town disappear behind them. I thought it would feel different, seeing them again, facing my father. Different how? I don't know. Like closure, maybe? Like I could move on. She shook her head. But it just made me angrier. Anger's not always bad. Sometimes it's fuel. Fuel for what? For whatever comes next. Elias guided the horse around a fallen branch. You've got decisions to make, Clara, about your future, about Kat's future. That anger can help you make the hard choices. Clara knew he was right, but the hard choices still terrified her. They rode in silence as darkness fell. The trail grew harder to see, but the horse knew the way. Eventually the cabin came into view, windows glowing with the fire Elias had banked before they left. Home. It wasn't permanent. It couldn't be. But for now, it was shelter. It was safety. It was enough. Elias helped Clara dismount and carried the supplies inside while she settled Kat in the cradle. The baby woke long enough to nurse, then fell back asleep. Clara sat by the fire, exhausted and emotionally wrung out. Elias made tea and brought her a cup. They sat together in the firelight, not talking, just existing in the same space. Thank you, Clara said finally, for standing up for me today. For Kat. You don't need to thank me for basic decency. Maybe not, but I'm going to anyway. He nodded, accepting it. They finished their tea and prepared for bed. Clara checked on Kat one last time, then collapsed into her own bed, every muscle aching. She'd survived another day, faced her father in the town and come out the other side. It wasn't victory, but it wasn't defeat either. It was survival. And sometimes survival was enough. 2 weeks after their trip to town, the rider came. Clara was hanging laundry on the line Elias had strung between two pines when she heard hoofbeats on the trail. Her hands stilled on the wet fabric, her heart jumping. Visitors were rare up here, nearly unheard of. Elias emerged from the woodshed, axe in hand, his body tense. He moved to stand between the approaching rider and the cabin where Kat was sleeping inside. The man who rode into the clearing was dressed too well for these mountains. Dark suit, polished boots, a leather satchel strapped to his saddle. His horse looked exhausted, foam flecking its mouth. He'd ridden hard to get here. Elias Crow? The man called out. Who's asking? The rider dismounted, pulling papers from his satchel. My name is Howard Jennings. I'm an attorney representing the Continental Pacific Railroad Company. I need to speak with you about a legal matter. Clara felt ice settle in her stomach. Nothing good ever came from lawyers and railroad men. Elias didn't lower the axe. Say what you came to say. Jennings glanced at Clara, then back to Elias. This concerns Miss Clara Whitmore and her situation. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of her. Jennings sighed and unfolded one of the papers. Very well. 3 days ago, William Whitmore entered into a contract with representatives of Continental Pacific. He sold all rights to Miss Whitmore's child, born or unborn, to the company for the sum of $200. Clara's legs went weak. What? It's a standard indenture agreement, Jennings continued, his tone businesslike. The child will be raised in company housing, educated at company expense, and upon reaching majority will enter company service. It's quite generous, actually. The child will have opportunities Miss Whitmore could never provide. You can't do that, Clara said, her voice shaking. She's my daughter. He can't sell her. Actually, he can. As your legal guardian. I'm 19 years old. He's not my guardian. Legally, as an unmarried woman without independent means, you fall under his authority until age 21 or marriage. Jennings pulled out another document. Furthermore, Mr. Whitmore's contract with Mr. Crow stipulates that you and the child remain under Mr. Whitmore's legal oversight for the duration of the labor agreement. Mr. Crow purchased your labor, not your legal autonomy. Clara looked at Elias, desperate. Is that true? Elias's face had gone stone cold. What exactly are you here for, Jennings? To collect the child, of course. The company has facilities in Denver ready to receive her. We'll provide excellent care. Get off my property. Mr. Crow, I understand this is upsetting, but the law is clear. The contract is valid. If you interfere, you'll be in violation of... I said get off my property. Elias took a step forward, still gripping the axe. Now! Jennings' professional mask slipped, showing fear underneath, but he held his ground. I'm authorized to involve the territorial marshal if necessary. This can be resolved peacefully or through force. Your choice. The marshal's office is in Helena. That's 3 days' ride from here, and the trails are still muddy from snowmelt. You threaten me with the law all you want, but you're alone on my mountain right now. Think about that. Jennings did think about it. His hand moved toward his coat, where Clara could see the outline of a pistol. Elias saw it too. Don't, Elias said quietly. You'll be dead before you clear leather. The two men stared at each other. Clara stood frozen, her mind racing. They were going to take Kat. Her father had sold her daughter like livestock, and these railroad men were going to take her baby, and Clara would never see her again. I'll give you until the end of the week, Jennings said finally, backing toward his horse. That's more than generous. Gather the child's things. Make your peace with the situation. But come Friday, I'm returning with the marshal and a full escort. If you resist, Mr. Crow, you'll be arrested. Miss Whitmore will be returned to her father's custody, and the child will be taken regardless. He mounted his horse and turned back the way he'd come, not waiting for a response. Clara's knees gave out. She sank to the ground, her whole body shaking. Elias dropped the axe and was at her side in seconds, his hands on her shoulders. Breathe, he ordered. Clara, breathe. She couldn't. Her chest was too tight, her throat closing. They were going to take Kat, take her baby, and give her to strangers, and Clara would never... Clara! Elias's voice cut through the panic. Look at me. She forced her eyes to his face. Those gray eyes were hard as winter ice, but there was something burning underneath. Fury. They're not taking her, he said. Do you hear me? They're not taking your daughter. How can you stop them? The law... Forget the law. We'll figure something out. He helped her to her feet. Come inside, we need to think. Clara stumbled into the cabin, her legs barely working. Kat was awake in her cradle, making small noises. Clara picked her up and held her close, breathing in the baby's scent, milk and soap and something purely her. $200, Clara said numbly. He sold her for $200. Elias was pacing, his mind clearly working through options. The railroad's been buying up land all through this territory. They need workers, servants, people they can control. Children are perfect for that. Raise them from infancy. Make them loyal to the company. That's slavery. Close enough. But it's legal as long as they frame it right. He stopped pacing. We've got 4 days. Friday, Jennings comes back with the marshal. We need a plan before then. What plan? He said the contract is legal. We can't fight it. There's always a way to fight. Elias moved to his shelves, pulling down a thick book. Territorial law, from the look of it. He started flipping through pages, his finger tracing lines of text. Clara sat with Kat, her mind spinning. 4 days. Less than a week before strangers came to rip her daughter away. She'd survived so much, her father's cruelty, the public humiliation, childbirth in a storm, but this felt insurmountable. Here, Elias said suddenly. He turned the book toward Clara, pointing to a specific passage. Territorial Law, Section 47. A child born to an unmarried woman falls under the mother's legal guardianship unless the father claims paternity or the grandfather exercises guardian rights. My father already exercised those rights. That's how he sold her. But there's an exception, Elias read aloud. Guardian rights are nullified if the mother marries before the child reaches 3 months of age. Upon marriage, all legal authority transfers to the husband. Clara stared at him. I don't understand. If you were married, your husband would have legal authority over Kat, not your father. The contract he made would be void because he wouldn't have had the right to make it in the first place. But I'm not married. You could be. The words hung in the air between them. Clara's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Are you suggesting? I'm suggesting a solution to a legal problem. Elias's voice was carefully neutral. Marriage is a contract. We could enter into one strictly for legal protection. It would void your father's authority, give you and Kat legal standing. That's insane. Maybe. But it would work. Clara looked down at Kat, who was gripping her finger with tiny, perfect hands. A marriage of convenience to a man she'd known less than 3 months. A stranger who'd bought her labor contract and given her shelter. A stranger who'd delivered her baby in a storm and never asked for anything in return. Why would you do this? Clara asked. You'd be legally responsible for both of us, for years, maybe forever, if we couldn't dissolve it later. Because it's the right thing to do. Elias closed the law book. And because no child deserves to be sold like property. I've seen what happens to people who grow up owned by companies. It's not a life. But marriage, Elias, that's not something to enter into lightly. I know exactly what it is. I'm not proposing romance or love or any of that. I'm proposing a legal arrangement that protects you and Kat from your father and the railroad. He met her eyes. We could live exactly as we are now. Separate rooms, separate lives. Just with a piece of paper that says you're my wife instead of my servant. Clara's mind raced through the implications. Marriage would mean safety for Kat, legal protection she desperately needed. But it would also mean binding herself to Elias permanently, or at least until they could find a way to dissolve it. And in a territory where divorce was nearly impossible, that might mean the rest of her life. I need to think, Clara said. You've got until Friday. That's when Jennings comes back. Elias moved toward the door. I'm going to check the traps. You think, and we'll talk tonight. He left her alone with Kat and her spiraling thoughts. Clara spent the day in a daze, going through the motions of feeding Kat, preparing food, cleaning. Her mind kept circling back to the same impossible choice. Marry Elias or lose her daughter. Those were the only options. She thought about Thomas, who'd promised marriage and vanished. The pain of that betrayal was still raw, even months later. How could she trust another man's promises, even practical ones? But Elias wasn't Thomas. He'd proven himself through actions, not words. He'd given her shelter when she had nowhere else to go, helped her through childbirth, protected her from her father's cruelty. He'd never lied to her or promised things he couldn't deliver. Still, marriage. It felt too huge, too permanent. When Elias returned at dusk, Clara had made her decision. If we do this, she said before he could even take off his coat, I need to know you understand what you're agreeing to. I have nothing to offer you. No money, no property, no connections. Just me and a baby and a lot of problems. I know what I'm agreeing to. And you're sure? Because once we do this, there's no easy way back. I'm sure. He hung his coat on the peg. Are you? Clara looked at Kat, sleeping peacefully in her cradle. Then back at Elias, this strange, quiet man who'd become her only ally in a world that wanted to destroy her. Yes, she said. I'll marry you. Elias nodded once. Then we need to act fast. There's a circuit judge who comes through these parts, Samuel Morton. He's up at the Gallagher mining camp right now, about 8 hours north. If we leave at first light, we can reach him by mid-afternoon, get married, and be back before nightfall. Can we make that trip with Kat? We'll have to. I'm not leaving her here unprotected, and you can't be separated from her for that long. He moved to the shelves, pulling down supplies. We'll bundle her warm and ride fast. She'll be fine. That night, Clara barely slept. She kept thinking about what dawn would bring. A hasty marriage to a near stranger, performed by some judge in a mining camp, all to outmaneuver her father's greed and the railroad's legal maneuvering. It felt surreal, like something from a dime novel, not real life. But Kat's soft breathing in the cradle beside her was real. The threat of losing her daughter was real. And Elias's offer, however unconventional, was the only lifeline Clara had. They left before sunrise, the world still gray and cold. Elias had rigged the sling so Clara could carry Kat against her chest, the baby bundled in layers of wool. The horse moved at a steady trot, eating up miles while Clara held on and tried not to think too hard about what they were doing. The mining camp appeared around 2 in the afternoon, a sprawling collection of tents and rough buildings clinging to a hillside. Men were everywhere, covered in mud and rock dust, moving between the mine entrance and various work sites. Elias guided the horse directly to the largest tent, where a hand-painted sign read, "Administration." He dismounted and helped Clara down, then pushed through the tent flap without knocking. Inside, a portly man in his 60s sat behind a makeshift desk, spectacles perched on his nose as he reviewed documents. He looked up, startled. "Judge Morton?" Elias asked. "I am. And you are?" "Elias Crow. This is Clara Whitmore. We need you to marry us." Morton blinked. "I beg your pardon? We need to be married. Today. Right now, if possible." "I see." Morton set down his papers, studying them both carefully. His eyes lingered on Kat. "Is there some urgency to this matter?" "There is," Clara said, finding her voice. "Legal complications. We need the marriage registered and documented before the end of the week." Legal complications. Morton's expression suggested he'd heard that excuse before. "Young lady, are you being coerced?" "No." "Are you of legal age?" "I'm 19. "And you, Mr. Crow?" 36. Morton frowned. "That's quite an age gap. And given the circumstances, the baby, the rush, I'm inclined to ask more questions before I perform any ceremony." Elias's jaw tightened, but Clara spoke before he could. "My father sold my daughter to the railroad," she said bluntly. "He had a lawyer draw up a contract giving them custody in exchange for $200. They're coming to collect her in 3 days. The only way to void that contract is if I marry before she's 3 months old. That's the law." Morton's eyebrows shot up. "William Whitmore sold his grandchild? You know him?" "I know of him. Schoolmaster down in Bitterroot. Pious man. Or so he claims." Morton's expression hardened. "I also know the railroad's been engaging in some questionable contracts lately, taking children from desperate families, promising education and opportunity, delivering exploitation instead." "Then you understand why we need to do this now," Elias said. Morton studied them both for a long moment. Then he stood. "I'll need witnesses and proper documentation. This marriage will be scrutinized, given the circumstances. It needs to be absolutely legal and binding." "Whatever it takes," Clara said. Morton called in 2 miners to serve as witnesses, rough men who looked bemused but willing. He pulled out the proper forms and began filling them in, asking questions about names, ages, residence. "Do you have a ring?" Morton asked Elias. "No." "Any token of the union?" Elias hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small carved figure, a bird in flight, exquisitely detailed. Clara recognized it from his collection of wood carvings. "This was my mother's favorite," he said quietly, pressing it into Clara's hand. "She's gone now, but she'd have approved of this, using it this way." Clara's fingers closed around the small carving, smooth and warm from Elias's pocket. It felt significant in a way a gold ring never could have. Morton cleared his throat. "Very well, let's proceed." He opened a worn book, legal code or prayer book, Clara couldn't tell, and began the ceremony. It was nothing like Clara had imagined her wedding would be. No church, no flowers, no family. Just a judge's tent in a mining camp, two strangers as witnesses, and a man she barely knew promising to honor and protect her for legal expediency rather than love. But when Morton asked if she took Elias Crow as her lawful husband, Clara looked at the man who'd saved her life and her daughter's life and said clearly, "I do." Elias's response was equally firm. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you husband and wife." Morton signed the certificate with a flourish. "The marriage is registered as of this date, April 17th, 1883. May it serve whatever purpose you require." He wasn't being romantic. He was being practical. Clara appreciated that. The witnesses signed, Morton made copies of the certificate and handed one to Elias. "Keep this safe. You'll need it when the railroad comes calling." "Thank you," Claire said. "Don't thank me yet. You've just tied yourself legally to a virtual stranger to protect your child. That's desperation, not celebration." But his tone was kind. "Still, I hope it works, and I hope Whitmore gets what's coming to him." They left the mining camp as the sun was sinking toward the mountains. Clara rode in front of Elias, Cat pressed between them, the marriage certificate tucked safely in Elias's coat pocket. Clara Crow. That was her name now. The thought felt strange and heavy, and somehow right all at once. "Are you all right?" Elias asked after they'd been riding for an hour. "I don't know." Clara shifted Cat, who was fussing. "I'm married, I'm a wife, and I barely know my husband." "We'll figure it out." "Will we?" "We have to. Jennings will be back Friday with the marshal. We need to be ready." His arms tightened slightly around her. Not intimate, just steadying. "But we did the right thing. Whatever happens next, we did the right thing." Clara wanted to believe that. She held Cat close and watched the trail ahead, trying not to think about what Friday would bring. They reached the cabin after dark, both exhausted. Elias tended the horse while Clara fed Cat and got her settled. When Elias came inside, he looked as tired as Clara felt. "Get some sleep," he said. "I'll keep watch tonight in case Jennings decides to come early." "You need to sleep too. I'll sleep when this is over." Clara wanted to argue but didn't have the energy. She took Cat to the bedroom and collapsed into bed, still fully dressed. Her last thought before sleep took her was that she was married now, legally bound to Elias Crow. For better or worse, her fate was tied to his. The next 3 days were tense. Elias kept his rifle close, checking the trail constantly. Clara tried to maintain some normalcy, cooking and caring for Cat, but fear sat like a stone in her stomach. What if the marriage wasn't enough? What if the railroad found some other legal loophole? What if they came with enough men that Elias couldn't stop them? Thursday night, neither of them slept. They sat by the fire, taking turns holding Cat, waiting for dawn. Friday arrived clear and cold. Around noon, they heard horses. Elias grabbed his rifle. "Stay inside with Cat. Don't come out unless I call you." Clara wanted to protest, but knew he was right. She retreated to the bedroom, holding Cat close, straining to hear what was happening outside. Voices carried through the cabin walls, Jennings sounding irritated. Another voice, older, authoritative. The marshal, probably. And Elias, calm and deadly. "I'm here for the Whitmore child," Jennings announced. "We have legal authority." "You had legal authority," Elias interrupted. "You don't anymore." "What are you talking about?" "Clara Whitmore is now Clara Crow, my wife. As of last Tuesday, legally married and registered with Judge Samuel Morton in the territorial records." Silence. Then Jennings' voice, sharp with anger. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious. The marriage voids William Whitmore's guardian authority. He had no right to sell the child because he no longer had legal custody when the contract was made. Your contract is worthless." "That's a blatant manipulation of the law. It's using the law exactly as written. You don't like it, take it up with the territorial legislature." The marshal's voice cut in. "Mr. Crow, I need to see the marriage certificate." "Of course." Clara heard Elias's footsteps, then the rustle of paper. A long pause. "It's legitimate," the marshal said finally. "Properly registered, witnessed, dated. The marriage predates the attempted custody transfer by 5 days." "This is outrageous," Jennings sputtered. "We had an agreement." "You had an agreement with a man who didn't have the legal right to make it. the marshal said. Mr. Crow is correct. The contract is void. We'll contest this. The railroad has resources. Contest all you want. But as of right now, I have no legal basis to remove the child from her mother's custody. She's married, the husband has authority, and there's no evidence of abuse or neglect. Clara sagged against the wall, relief flooding through her. It had worked. The marriage had worked. She heard more arguing, Jennings threatening lawsuits and appeals. But eventually the voices faded, replaced by the sound of horses leaving. The cabin door opened. "Clara," Elias called. "They're gone." She emerged with Kat, her legs shaking. Elias stood by the fire, the rifle propped against the wall, the marriage certificate still in his hand. "It worked?" Clara asked, needing to hear him say it. "It worked. Jennings is furious, but the law is on our side now." He looked at the certificate, then at Clara. "You're safe, both of you." Clara started crying, huge, gasping sobs of relief and exhaustion and overwhelming emotion. Elias stood there awkwardly, clearly unsure what to do. Finally, he crossed the room and put a hand on her shoulder. "It's over," he said quietly. "You're safe now." Clara leaned into him, Kat pressed between them, and let herself cry. For everything she'd lost and everything she'd survived and everything she'd gained through this strange, unexpected turn her life had taken. She was married to a man she barely knew. She was a mother. She was safe. And somehow, impossibly, that was enough. The week after Jennings left should have brought relief. Instead, it brought an awkward tension that settled over the cabin like morning fog. Clara and Elias moved around each other carefully, overly polite, dancing around the fact that they were now legally husband and wife, but still essentially strangers. Elias slept in the loft. Clara kept the bedroom. They shared meals and chores and conversations about practical matters, firewood, supplies, Kat's feeding schedule. But neither of them addressed the marriage itself or what it meant beyond the legal protection it provided. Clara told herself this was fine. They'd agreed it was a practical arrangement, nothing more. But late at night, nursing Kat in the darkness, she found herself wondering what kind of life she'd actually signed up for. The answer came 2 weeks later when William Whitmore arrived at the cabin with the territorial marshal and a lawyer Clara didn't recognize. She was hanging laundry when she heard the horses. Her stomach dropped. Elias was out checking trap lines and wouldn't be back for hours. She was alone with Kat, and her father was here. Clara scooped up the baby and retreated to the cabin, barring the door. Through the window, she watched 3 men dismount. Her father looked older somehow, more bitter. The marshal was the same one who'd come with Jennings, a weathered man named Crawford. The lawyer was young, nervous, clutching a leather case. "Clara Whitmore," her father shouted. "I know you're in there. Come out and face what you've done." Clara's hands shook, but she held Kat close and stayed silent. "You can't hide forever," William continued. "The marriage is a fraud. You manipulated the law to steal what rightfully belongs to me." "Mr. Whitmore," Marshal Crawford said, his tone weary. "We've been through this. The marriage is legal. The judge verified. The judge was deceived. My daughter conspired with that mountain savage to deprive the railroad of property that was legally contracted." Claire couldn't stay silent at that. She moved to the window and opened it enough to shout back, "Kat is not property, and I'm not your daughter anymore. I'm Clara Crow, and you have no authority over me or my child." William's face twisted with rage. "You ungrateful wretch! After everything I did for you, everything you did? You sold me like livestock. You threw me out and then tried to sell my baby to strangers. I tried to secure a future for that bastard. Her name is Catherine." Claire's voice cracked. "She has a name. She's a person, not a commodity for you to trade for railroad money." The young lawyer stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Mrs. Crow, my name is Daniel Pierce. I represent your father in a legal challenge to your marriage. We have grounds to believe the union was entered into fraudulently for the sole purpose of circumventing a valid contract." "The contract wasn't valid," Clara shot back. "My father had no right to sell custody of my child. The law is clear on that." "The law is also clear about fraudulent marriages," Pierce countered. "If we can prove that you and Mr. Crow entered into marriage solely to void the railroad contract, with no intention of an actual marital relationship, the union can be annulled. at which point your father's authority would be restored and the original contract would stand. Clara's heart stopped. She hadn't thought of that. The marriage had been for legal protection, yes, but fraudulent. Could they actually prove that? You can't prove anything, Clara said, trying to sound confident. Can't we? William's smile was cruel. You and Crow live in separate rooms. You barely know each other. The marriage was performed with unseemly haste at a mining camp with no proper courtship or engagement. Any reasonable person can see it's a sham. Marshal Crawford looked uncomfortable. Mr. Whitmore, even if that's true, the marriage is still legal unless a court annuls it, and that could take months. Then we'll wait months, years if necessary. William's eyes were fixed on Clara with pure hatred. I will not be made a fool of by my own daughter. That child belongs to the railroad, and I'll see the contract honored if it's the last thing I do. Why? Clara demanded, her voice breaking. Why do you hate me so much? What did I ever do to you except fail to be perfect? William's expression didn't soften. You remind me every day of your mother's weakness, her sentimentality, her foolish romanticism. She thought she could change me, make me into something I wasn't. She failed, and then she died and left me with you. Another weak, sentimental fool who threw away every advantage I gave you for a moment's pleasure with a coward. The words hit Clara like blows. She'd known her father was cold, but this level of venom still shocked her. My mother was worth 10 of you, Clara said quietly, and she deserves so much better. Your mother got exactly what she deserved, a short, hard life and an early grave, as will you if you continue down this path. Marshal Crawford stepped between them. That's enough. Mr. Whitmore, you've stated your intention to challenge the marriage. That's a matter for the courts. But for now, the union stands and Mrs. Crow has legal custody of her child. I suggest you leave before this gets uglier. We're not leaving without— Yes, you are. The new voice came from behind them. Elias had returned, silent as always, and now stood at the edge of the clearing with his rifle cradled casually in his arms. The marshal asked you to leave. I'm telling you. William spun around. This doesn't concern you, Crow. It concerns me completely. That's my wife you're threatening, my daughter you're trying to steal. She's not your daughter. She's not even her daughter. She's railroad property according to a legal contract. A contract you had no authority to make. Elias's voice was deadly calm. And if you want to challenge the marriage in court, fine. File your papers, hire your lawyers, spend all the railroad money you want. But you're going to do it from off my property. Pierce spoke up nervously. Mr. Crow, we have grounds for an annulment hearing. The marriage appears to be exactly what it is. A legal union between two adults. How we conduct our private life is none of your concern. Elias looked at Marshal Crawford. Unless there's an actual legal order requiring my presence somewhere, I'm asking you to escort these men off my land. Crawford nodded slowly. Mr. Whitmore, Mr. Pierce, we're leaving. Now. This isn't over, William said, his voice shaking with rage. I'll see you both destroyed for this. The railroad has resources you can't imagine, lawyers, judges, politicians in their pocket. You can't win. Maybe not, Elias said, but we can make you work for it. And every day we keep you tied up in court is another day Kat stays with her mother where she belongs. The three men mounted their horses. William looked at Clara one last time, his expression filled with such hatred that she actually flinched. You were a mistake from the moment you were born, he said, and that thing you're holding is proof that mistakes breed mistakes. Then they were gone, riding back down the mountain trail. Clara stood at the window, shaking so hard she thought she might drop Kat. Elias came inside and took the baby gently, then guided Clara to a chair. Breathe, he said. Just breathe. He's going to take her. Oh, Clara's voice was barely a whisper. He'll find a way. The annulment. If they can prove the marriage is fraudulent, they can't prove what isn't true. But it is true. We married to protect Kat, not because we wanted to be husband and wife. That's fraud. Elias set Kat in her cradle and knelt in front of Clara's chair. Listen to me. A marriage is what the people in it make it. We entered into it for legal protection, yes, but that doesn't make it fraudulent. People marry for all kinds of reasons: money, status, family obligation. Ours is no different. But we're not actually. Clara couldn't finish the sentence. We live together. We share a home. We're raising a child together. We work as partners. Elias's gray eyes were intense. The law doesn't require us to share a bed to make the marriage valid. It requires us to act as a married couple in the eyes of society. And we do that. Do we? Yes. He stood, moving to the fire. But if you're worried about the annulment challenge, there's a simple solution. Clara's heart started pounding. What solution? We make the marriage real. Indisputably, undeniably real. The implication hung in the air between them. Clara felt her face flush hot. I mean we live as actual husband and wife, share a room, act like a married couple in all ways. Elias kept his back to her, his voice carefully neutral. It's the only way to remove all doubt. If the marriage is consummated, there's no legal grounds for annulment based on fraud. Clara's mind was racing. The thought of sharing Elias's bed, of being intimate with a man she barely knew, made her stomach twist with anxiety. Her only experience had been with Thomas, and that had ended in betrayal and abandonment, but the alternative was losing Kat. I can't, Clara started, then stopped. I don't know if I can do that. I'm not asking you to decide right now. Elias finally turned to face her. But think about it. Because your father's right about one thing, the railroad has resources. If they want to push this annulment through, they'll find sympathetic judges and lawyers who'll argue that our marriage is a legal fiction. The only way to defeat that argument completely is to make it undeniably real. He was right. Clara knew he was right. But the thought of... Kat started crying, breaking the tension. Clara went to her gratefully, picking up the baby and holding her close. Kat's warm weight, her small, solid presence, reminded Clara what was at stake. She'd do anything to protect her daughter, anything, even marry a stranger, even share his bed if that's what it took. I'll think about it, Clara said quietly. Elias nodded and went outside, leaving her alone with her thoughts and her fear and her desperately sleeping daughter. The next week passed in uneasy silence. Clara thought constantly about Elias's proposition. Part of her recoiled from the idea. She barely knew this man, despite living with him for months. He was kind but distant, helpful but closed off. The thought of physical intimacy with him felt wrong somehow. But another part of her, the practical, desperate part, knew he was right. The only way to make the marriage legally unassailable was to consummate it, to remove any possible argument that it was fraudulent. She watched Elias when he didn't know she was looking, noticed the way he moved, economical and sure, the way he was patient with Kat, his large hands surprisingly gentle when he held her, the way he never pushed Clara, never demanded anything beyond basic partnership. He was a good man. She knew that much. But could she trust him with her body? With that final vulnerability? The decision was made for her 10 days later when Pierce returned with legal papers. An annulment hearing had been scheduled in Helena for 6 weeks from now. The railroad was pushing it through on an expedited basis, claiming fraud and deception. They're serious about this, Elias said, reading the documents. They've got 3 lawyers on the case and depositions scheduled from people in Bitterroot who'll testify we barely know each other. What do we do? We give them nothing to work with. He looked at Clara. We need to act like a married couple, publicly and privately. No more separate rooms, no more polite distance. We need to be convincing. Clara's mouth went dry. I mean whatever you're comfortable with. But Clara, if we're going to fight this, we need to commit completely. Half measures won't work. That night, after Kat was asleep, Clara moved her things into the loft. It felt surreal, climbing the ladder with her nightdress and few belongings, entering Elias's space. He'd built a larger bed up here, she noticed, prepared for this possibility. He was already lying on one side, fully clothed except for his boots. He didn't look at her as she climbed in beside him, keeping as much distance as the bed allowed. They lay in darkness, not touching, barely breathing. I won't hurt you, Elias said quietly, or push you into anything you don't want. This arrangement is whatever you're comfortable with. I don't know what I'm comfortable with. Then we'll figure it out together. He shifted slightly. I know what Thomas did to you. Sarah Mitchell told me when I was in town last week. She thought I should know. Clara's chest tightened. What did she tell you? That he made promises he never intended to keep, that he used you and left you alone to face the consequences. Elias's voice was hard, that he was a coward and a liar. He said he loved me. Words are easy. Actions matter more. Elias was quiet for a moment. I'm not Thomas, Clara. I won't make promises I can't keep, but I will promise you this. Whatever happens between us, I'll never abandon you or Kat. The marriage may have started as legal protection, but it's real now. You're my wife. That means something to me. Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. I don't know how to trust that. Then don't trust it yet. Just don't fight it either. Let me prove it over time. They lay in silence after that. Eventually, Clara drifted into uneasy sleep, hyper-aware of the warm presence beside her. She woke in the night to find she'd rolled closer to Elias in her sleep, her hand resting on his chest. His arm was around her shoulders, protective rather than possessive. She should pull away, should maintain the distance. Instead, she let herself stay. Just for a moment, just to feel what it was like to not be alone. The weeks before the hearing were strange. Clara and Elias maintained the appearance of a normal married couple, sleeping in the same bed, eating together, working side by side. They didn't discuss the physical aspect of marriage, but something was slowly shifting between them. Clara found herself noticing things about Elias she'd missed before. The way he hummed while he worked. The small smile that touched his lips when Kat did something funny. The fact that he read every night before bed, lips moving slightly over the words. She caught him watching her too sometimes. Not with lust, she would have recognized that from Thomas, but with something else. Interest, maybe. Or simple companionship. One night, 3 weeks before the hearing, Clara woke from a nightmare about her father stealing Kat. She must have cried out because Elias was suddenly awake, his hand on her shoulder. You're safe, he said. It was just a dream. He was taking her. I couldn't stop him. It was just a dream, Elias repeated. Kat's right here. He gestured to the cradle beside the bed, where Kat slept peacefully. And no one's taking her, I promise. Clara was shaking, the fear still gripping her. Without thinking, she pressed closer to Elias, seeking comfort. He went still for a moment. Then his arms came around her, solid and warm. It's all right, he murmured. You're safe, both of you. Clara buried her face against his chest and let herself cry. For everything she'd lost. For the fear that still haunted her. For the impossible situation they were trapped in. Elias held her through it all, one hand stroking her hair, whispering reassurances that gradually calmed her racing heart. When she finally pulled back, embarrassed, he didn't let go completely, just loosened his hold enough to look at her face. Better? He asked. Yes. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Don't apologize. You're entitled to fear, to grief, to all of it. His thumb brushed away a tear on her cheek. But you're not alone anymore, Clara. Whatever happens, you're not alone. Something in his eyes made Clara's breath catch. Not pity, not obligation, something deeper that she didn't have a name for yet. Elias, she whispered, the marriage is real, however you want it to be. I don't know what I want. Then we'll figure it out. Together. He kissed her forehead, gentle and chaste, then settled back down, keeping one arm around her. Clara lay against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, and for the first time in months felt something like peace. The hearing in Helena was scheduled for a Tuesday in mid-June. They left the cabin on Sunday, Kat bundled against Clara's chest, and rode for 2 days to reach the territorial capital. Helena was bigger than Bitterroot, a real city with brick buildings and paved streets and people everywhere. Clara felt overwhelmed and small as they found lodging at a boarding house. Elias had hired a lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret Davis, who specialized in family law and had a reputation for destroying railroad lawyers in court. They're going to argue fraud, Davis told them the night before the hearing, spreading papers across the boarding house table. They'll bring witnesses who'll say you barely knew each other, that the marriage was rushed and convenient. They'll paint you as schemers who manipulated the law. How do we fight that? Clara asked. By being honest about why you married, but showing that the marriage has become real regardless of its origins. Davis looked between them. Are you sharing a room here? Yes, Elias said. Good. And at home? Yes. How long? 5 weeks. Davis made a note. That helps. What about physical intimacy? Clara felt her face burn. Elias's expression didn't change. That's private. Not anymore, it isn't. The railroad's lawyers will ask. If you've consummated the marriage, it destroys their fraud argument completely. If you haven't, Davis shrugged. They'll use it against you. Clara and Elias looked at each other. They'd been sharing a bed for weeks, but they hadn't crossed that final line. Clara hadn't been ready. Elias hadn't pushed. We're working toward it, Elias said carefully. The marriage is real in every way that matters. That's not going to be enough in court. Davis leaned forward. I need to know the truth. Have you consummated this marriage or not? Silence. Clara felt trapped, cornered. The answer was no, and everyone in the room knew it. Then we have a problem, Davis said, because the railroad's lawyers will absolutely ask that question under oath. And if you lie, you'll be committing perjury. If you tell the truth, you hand them their fraud argument. What do we do? Clara asked, her voice small. You have until tomorrow morning. Davis started gathering her papers. Either consummate the marriage tonight and answer truthfully that you have, or prepare for a very ugly court battle where the outcome is far from certain. She left them alone in the room. Clara sat frozen, her mind blank with panic. Kat was sleeping in a borrowed cradle, oblivious to the stakes. Clara, Elias said gently. I know. She couldn't look at him. I know what we have to do. I can't. You can't be intimate with a man you don't love. I understand. It's not that. I don't know what love is anymore. Thomas said he loved me, and it was all lies. Clara finally met his eyes. But it feels different. You've been kind when you didn't have to be, patient when you had no reason. You've protected Kat and given us a home and asked for nothing in return. I asked you to marry me. For legal protection, not because you wanted me. Elias was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Don't tell me what I want, Clara. You don't know. Something in his tone made Clara's heart stutter. What are you saying? I'm saying the marriage started as legal protection, but it stopped being just that weeks ago, maybe months ago. He moved closer, his eyes intense. You think I don't notice you? The way you sing to Kat when you think I'm not listening, the way you read by the fire with your hair falling in your face, the way you've grown stronger and more confident every day since I met you. Clara couldn't breathe. Elias, I know I'm not the husband you imagined. I'm too old, too rough, too damaged from things I've seen and done. But I care about you, Clara, more than I have any right to. And if you can find it in yourself to trust me, really trust me, I swear I'll spend every day proving that trust wasn't misplaced. Clara's hands were shaking. This was nothing like Thomas's flowery declarations. Elias wasn't promising forever or making grand romantic gestures. He was offering something simpler and infinitely more valuable. Honest partnership, real commitment. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. Not of you, of failing again, of trusting wrong. You didn't fail before. Thomas failed. Your father failed you. The whole town failed you. Elias took her hands in his. But I won't. I can't promise life will be easy or perfect, but I promise I'll be here. For you and for Kat. That's all I can give you. Clara looked at their joined hands. His were scarred and calloused from years of hard living. Hers were soft by comparison, though work had started to toughen them. Different hands, different lives, but somehow fitting together. All right, she said quietly. All right, what? All right, I trust you. I want to try, to make this real. Elias's expression softened in a way she'd never seen before. You're sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. He stood and moved to check on Kat, making sure she was settled. Then he dimmed the lantern and came back to Clara. She was trembling, her body tense with old fear and new anticipation. We don't have to rush, Elias said softly. We've got all night. He kissed her then, gentle at first, asking permission with every movement. Clara kissed back hesitantly. Then with more confidence as the fear began to recede. This was Elias, the man who'd saved her life, who'd delivered her baby, who'd married her to protect her and somehow become something more in the process. She could trust this. Trust him. The rest happened slowly, carefully, with Elias checking constantly to make sure she was comfortable. It wasn't the passionate affair from romance novels. It was awkward in places, tender in others, and when it was over, Clara felt changed in a way she couldn't quite articulate. They lay together afterward, Elias's arm around her, both of them staring at the ceiling. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Yes." Clara was surprised to find it was true. Better than all right. "No regrets?" "No." She turned to look at him. "Thank you. For being patient, for waiting until I was ready. You're my wife. That's what marriage means, caring more about your comfort than my desires." Clara felt tears prick her eyes again, but these were different tears. Not grief or fear, something closer to hope. "I think I could love you," she whispered, "if you give me time." Elias pulled her closer. "We've got nothing but time." The hearing the next day was brutal. The railroad's lawyers were exactly as aggressive as Davis had warned, painting Clara as a conniving seductress who'd trapped Elias into fraudulent marriage to escape her rightful obligations. But when they asked under oath if the marriage had been consummated, Clara looked them in the eye and said, "Yes." Elias confirmed it. Davis produced the marriage certificate and testimony from Judge Morton. She called witnesses who'd seen Clara and Elias and Helena behaving as a normal married couple. William Whitmore testified that his daughter was a liar and a manipulator. But when Davis cross-examined him about selling his grandchild to the railroad, he faltered. The jury, required for annulment cases in Montana Territory, watched with growing distaste as William's true nature became clear. The verdict came after 3 days of testimony. The annulment petition was denied. The marriage was ruled valid and legal in all respects. Clara's father's contract with the railroad was declared void due to lack of proper authority. Kat would stay with Clara and Elias. She was their daughter now, in every way that mattered. William Whitmore left the courthouse without looking at Clara. She watched him go and felt nothing. No anger, no grief, just a cold finality. Whatever relationship they'd had was over, dead and buried. The railroad lawyers tried to appeal, but Davis shut them down with threats of countersuits for harassment and attempted kidnapping. Eventually, they gave up. Continental Pacific had bigger fish to fry than one baby in the Montana mountains. Clara, Elias, and Kat left Helena on a Friday and rode home to the cabin. The journey back felt different than the journey out. They weren't running anymore. They weren't hiding. They were just a family going home. Summer in the high country was brief but beautiful. The meadows exploded with wildflowers. The streams ran clear and cold with snowmelt. Kat grew bigger and stronger, her eyes bright and alert, her small personality emerging day by day. Clara learned to shoot Elias's rifle, to set traps, to identify edible plants. She was becoming a mountain woman herself, tough and capable. The soft, frightened girl who'd stood on that auction block felt like a different person. One August evening, Clara and Elias sat on the cabin porch watching the sunset while Kat played on a blanket between them. The baby was 6 months old now, trying to crawl, babbling happily at everything. "She's going to need other children eventually," Clara said. "Playmates, friends." "I know." Elias was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about that. There's a settlement forming about 20 miles south, families mostly, good people trying to build something real. You want to move there?" "No, but we could visit. Let Kat spend time with other children, maybe help with the building once in a while." He looked at Clara. "I'm not trying to hide anymore. Not from people or civilization or anything else. That stopped being enough the day I saw you on that auction block." Clara took his hand. Over the months, such casual touches had become natural, normal. "What is enough now?" "This. You, Kat. Building something that lasts." He squeezed her fingers. "I never thought I'd have a family. Never wanted one after the war. Couldn't imagine trusting anyone that much. But you changed that." "I didn't change anything. You chose to help me. And you chose to trust me, even when you had no reason to." Elias pulled her closer. We chose each other, Clara. That's what matters. Kat squealed and managed to roll over completely, clearly proud of herself. They both laughed, the sound echoing across the clearing. Fall came, painting the mountains gold and red. They made another trip to Bitterroot for supplies. This time, people treated them differently, not with judgment or pity, but with cautious respect. Word had spread about the trial, about William Whitmore's cruelty and the railroad's defeat. Sarah Mitchell invited Clara to a quilting circle. Mrs. Chen asked about Kat's health. Even Abraham Fletcher nodded grudgingly when they passed him on the street. Clara realized she didn't need their acceptance anymore, didn't crave it or fear its absence. She had something better, a real family, a real home. William Whitmore had left Bitterroot, Mrs. Chen told them quietly, moved east somewhere after the trial. People said he'd been asked to resign from his teaching position after the details of what he'd done became public knowledge. Clara felt a complicated mix of emotions at that news. Not satisfaction exactly, but a sense of justice being served. Winter came early that year. The first snow fell in October, blanketing the high country in white. Clara and Elias prepared carefully, enough firewood to last months, preserved food, warm clothes for Kat, who was growing out of everything. They spent the long winter nights reading together by the fire, Kat playing on a blanket between them. Elias taught Clara to carve wood. She taught him songs her mother used to sing. They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other's bodies and preferences. It wasn't passionate desperation, but something deeper, partnership layered with growing affection. One night in January, almost exactly a year after Elias had bought Clara's contract in the town square, Clara was nursing Kat before bed when she realized something. "I'm happy," she said aloud, surprised by the revelation. Elias looked up from the knife he was sharpening. "What?" "I'm happy. Right now in this moment, I'm actually happy." He smiled, not the small guarded expression he usually wore, but something full and genuine. "Good. You deserve to be." "So do you." "I am." He set down the knife and came to sit beside her. "More than I've been in 20 years, maybe ever." Clara leaned against him, Kat warm between them. Outside, wind howled around the cabin and snow piled higher, but inside they were warm and safe and together. Spring arrived late, as it always did in the mountains. But when it came, it brought new life and new possibilities. Clara discovered she was pregnant again in April. She told Elias while they were planting the kitchen garden, both of them covered in dirt. He went very still. "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure. All the same signs as with Kat." "How do you feel about it?" Clara considered the question honestly. Scared, but also excited. Kat needs a sibling, and this time it's different. This baby will have a father who wants them, a real family. Elias pulled her into his arms, heedless of the dirt. "We'll need to expand the cabin, build another room. We've got time. Not if you're anything like you were with Kat. Early babies run in your family, apparently." Clara laughed. "Then we'd better start building." They worked together through the spring and summer, adding a second bedroom to the cabin. Elias did the heavy construction while Clara helped where she could and took care of Kat, who was walking now and getting into everything. In August, the settlement to the south invited them to a harvest festival. Clara was 7 months pregnant and huge, but she wanted to go. Wanted Kat to see other children, other families. The settlement was small but thriving, maybe 30 families building homes and farms in a protected valley. The people were welcoming, genuinely kind. They admired Kat, congratulated Clara on the new baby, asked Elias for advice on hunting and trapping. A woman named Ruth, whose husband ran the general store, pulled Clara aside. "We heard what you went through in Bitterroot, what your father did." Clara tensed, expecting judgment, but Ruth just squeezed her hand. "You're brave," Ruth said quietly. "Standing up to him, to the railroad. A lot of women would have given up." "I didn't have a choice." "You had choices. You chose to fight, to survive, to build something good out of something terrible." Ruth smiled. "That's courage. We need more of it out here." They stayed for 3 days, and when they left, it was with promises to return. With the beginning of real friendships, real community. The baby, a boy this time, was born in October during the first snow. The labor was faster than Kat's had been, and Elias handled it with the same calm competence he brought to everything. When their son took his first breath and wailed his indignation at the cold world, Clara cried with relief and joy. "What should we name him?" Elias asked, holding the tiny bundle carefully. Clara thought of all the names that mattered. Her mother, Thomas? No, never Thomas. The life she'd left behind and the life she'd built. "James," she said finally. "James Elias Crow. After my father." Elias's voice was rough with emotion. "He was a good man. I'd like that." So James it was. Kat adored her little brother immediately, wanting to help with everything. The cabin was chaos, crying babies, laundry everywhere, too little sleep. But it was joyful chaos, chosen chaos. One night in December, Clara sat nursing James while Elias read to Kat by the fire. She looked around the cabin, at the warm glow of firelight, at her daughter's rapt attention to her father's story, at the snow falling gently outside. 2 years ago, she'd been standing on an auction block, alone and terrified, convinced her life was over. Now she had a husband who loved her, 2 healthy children, a home she'd helped build, friends in the settlement, a future that felt wide open with possibility. It wasn't the life she'd imagined as a girl. It was harder, rougher, with more work and less comfort. But it was real. It was hers. And it was enough. Elias looked up from the book and caught her watching. "What are you thinking?" "That I'd do it all again," Clara said softly. "Every terrible thing, every hard moment, if it meant ending up here with you." He smiled, that full, genuine smile that still surprised her sometimes. "Even the auction block?" "Even that. Because it brought me to you." Kat demanded the next page of the story. James finished nursing and fell asleep against Clara's shoulder. Outside, the wind sang through the pines and snow transformed the world into white silence. They were a family, imperfect, unconventional, born from desperation and necessity, but real, lasting, built on honest partnership and growing love. Clara had been sold like property and stripped of her dignity. She'd been abandoned and betrayed and cast out. But she'd survived. More than survived. She'd built something beautiful out of the wreckage. She was Clara Crow now, wife, mother, survivor. And she was finally, truly home.